At 46, Jason Momoa seems like the very definition of strength, towering, fearless, and unstoppable. From Aquaman to Game of Thrones, he's built a reputation as Hollywood's modern-day warrior. But behind the larger-than-life image lies a personal story far more fragile, painful, and human than his fans ever imagined. And now, as he reaches a turning point in his life, Jason is finally revealing the heartbreaking truth he has kept hidden for years. For the world, Momoa is that rare combination of rising star and global icon. But privately, his journey has been marked by profound loss, emotional battles, and a struggle that fame could never shield him from. He has spoken often about gratitude, love, and family, but now, he's ready to open up about the experiences that nearly broke him, the sacrifices he hid behind smiles, and the pain that shaped him into the man millions admire today. The tragedy isn't a headline scandal or a career collapse, it's something far more personal. It's the kind of quiet suffering that happens behind closed doors, when the cameras stop rolling and the world's expectations fall silent. Jason Momoa's heartbreak is rooted in relationships, identity, and the impossible pressure of carrying the weight of Hollywood while trying to protect the people he loves most. And today, as Jason confronts this chapter head-on, he is finally sharing the truth about the one event that changed everything, the one wound that never fully healed, and the one loss that has continued to define him long after the world moved on. This is the tragedy of Jason Momoa. Jason Momoa has always looked like the kind of man who could carry the world on his shoulders, fearless, powerful, and unshakable. But reaching 46 has revealed a completely different truth behind the legend. Beneath the tattoos, the muscles, and the warrior spirit is a man who has endured heartbreak after heartbreak, long before fame ever came his way. And as he finally opens up about his past, fans are shocked to learn just how much emotional pain Momoa hid while the world celebrated him as Hollywood's newest superhero. Jason's story doesn't begin on a red carpet or in a fancy studio office. It begins in Honolulu, Hawaii, where he grew up surrounded by culture, family, and a deep spiritual connection to the place he calls home. But even as a young boy, he experienced the first major heartbreak of his life, his parents separating. Jason has often spoken about how their split divided his world into two pieces. One part Hawaii, where his father lived. The other part Iowa, where his mother took him to start fresh. That constant movement, that feeling of being caught between two identities, stayed with him for years. He learned early how to smile through loneliness. When Momoa entered his teens, he struggled with fitting in. Standing out made him a target. Being different meant defending himself constantly. These emotional scars formed the foundation of someone who learned to be tough because life demanded it. When fans see his strength today, they don't realize it was built from survival. His life took a dramatic turn when he was discovered working in a surf shop. Almost overnight, Jason went from a quiet, unsure young man to a face recognized across the world thanks to Baywatch Hawaii. But this rise to fame brought something unexpected: judgment. Casting directors labeled him the muscle guy, the pretty face, and the surfer. No one cared about the depth beneath the surface. No one wanted to know his story. Hollywood underestimated him, and that painful feeling of being overlooked haunted him for years. Then came the moment that changed everything: his role as Khal Drogo in Game of Thrones. It made him a global icon. But few people know how much pressure, anxiety, and fear he carried behind the scenes. At the time, Jason was broke, truly broke. He had no steady work. He struggled to support his growing family. He was unsure if Hollywood had room for someone who didn't fit the mold. Landing Drogo saved him professionally, but came at a cost. The role was intense, physically and emotionally draining, and the sudden fame only added to the weight he carried silently. And while the world saw a warrior, Jason was battling something much deeper, an overwhelming fear of failing the people he loved most, his partner Lisa Bone and their 2 children. Every job mattered. Every paycheck mattered. Every moment away from home left him feeling like he was choosing career over family, even though both were essential for survival. That internal conflict slowly became one of the heaviest burdens he carried. When Jason finally reached the peak of global stardom with Aquaman, it should have been the happiest time of his life. But inside, he was cracking from years of emotional strained relationships. Long absences from home, personal losses he never shared publicly, and the crushing pressure of being the unbreakable hero the world expected. And then, just when it seemed everything was finally falling into place, came the heartbreak that changed Jason Momoa forever. The world first sensed something was wrong when Jason Momoa released a short, emotional statement announcing his separation from Lisa Bone. To fans, it felt impossible. Jason and Lisa were Hollywood's unbreakable couple, the kind of duo people looked at and said, "That's real love." But behind the scenes, the cracks had been forming long before the public saw anything for Jason. Lisa wasn't just a partner, she was the woman he had admired since childhood. He often joked she was his childhood crush that he manifested into reality. When they finally became a couple, he believed he had found his soulmate. And for years that seemed true. They built a peaceful, grounded family together, raising their 2 children with love, creativity, and a sense of spiritual connection. But Jason's career began to explode, first with Game of Thrones, then with Justice League, and finally Aquaman, which turned him into an international superstar. Suddenly, the man who once struggled to pay bills was flying across the world, filming non-stop and becoming the face of a billion-dollar franchise, Fame. However, has a cost. Jason spent long stretches away from home, sometimes months at a time. He tried to balance everything: shooting, press tours, personal projects, and family life, but the more successful he became, the less time he could give to the people he loved most. Lisa valued privacy, home, and stillness. Jason's world was now chaos, travel, and spotlight. The difference in lifestyles, once small, began to widen until it felt like 2 separate worlds. Friends close to the couple said the emotional distance became harder to ignore. Jason, exhausted from filming, would return home feeling like a stranger. Lisa, nurturing and introspective, struggled to adjust to the constant upheaval. They loved each other deeply, but love alone wasn't enough to bridge the new realities of their lives. And then came the pandemic. For many couples, lockdowns brought people closer. But for Jason and Lisa, it revealed just how far apart they had grown. Their priorities, once aligned, now diverged in painful ways. Lisa longed for peace and a slower-paced life rooted in spirituality. Jason felt creatively stifled and restless, knowing the momentum of his career was slipping away. The heartbreaking truth is that neither of them wanted the separation. They loved each other too much. But they were living lives that no longer fit together. When they finally announced their split, the statement was filled with dignity, love, and respect, but it could not mask the grief behind the decision. Jason didn't just lose a partner. He lost the foundation of the life he had built, the person who grounded him through every struggle. Fans noticed the transformation immediately. The man who once radiated joy, laughter, and boundless energy seemed quieter, softer, older. Interviews showed him tired, reflective, and sometimes emotional. He spoke often about trying to remain strong for his children. He admitted that fame had come with sacrifices he never wanted to make. Behind every smile was the weight of heartbreak. But perhaps the deepest pain came from watching his family adjust without him. Jason has always been a devoted father, losing the everyday moments, helping with schoolwork, making breakfast, Late-night conversations was a wound he felt every single day. Still, he refused to publicly blame anyone. He didn't lash out, didn't defend himself, didn't try to rewrite the narrative. Instead, he carried the heartbreak quietly, the way he has carried every pain in his life. But his story doesn't end there. Because after losing the love of his life, Jason faced another challenge, one that threatened not only his career, but his health, his identity, and his sense of purpose. After the heartbreak of losing his family unit, Jason Momoa tried to throw himself back into work. On the surface, it looked like a comeback: new movies, new projects, constant travel. But behind the curtain, the pressure was becoming unbearable. Jason wasn't just dealing with emotional pain, his physical health began to collapse in ways he never expected. Few fans knew the truth at the time, but Jason suffered multiple injuries while filming Aquaman and other action-heavy projects. His body was pushed to its limits, often functioning on little sleep and even less recovery time. In one interview, he admitted that his injuries were so severe that doctors warned him he needed immediate surgery to avoid long-term complications. He laughed through the interview, but his eyes revealed exhaustion. Jason had torn muscles, damaged ligaments, and even underwent hernia surgery. But what the world didn't know was the emotional toll behind each injury. Every time he got hurt, Jason feared what every Hollywood action star secretly fears. What if this is the injury that ends my career? His career had already been built on explosive roles: warriors, fighters, kings, superheroes. But those roles came with a cost. As he approached his mid-40s, Jason began to realize that his body was not invincible. The man who represented power and immortality on screen was behind closed doors, icing wounds, limping, and pushing through pain only he understood. Then came the financial pressure. Most people assumed Jason was as wealthy as any other blockbuster star. But the truth was far more complicated. Jason had long supported not just his own family but extended relatives, community obligations in Hawaii, and several environmental and charity projects he personally funded. When production shut down during the pandemic and when roles were delayed, the financial strain hit harder than fans realized. At one point, he admitted publicly that he couldn't even afford his house right after Game of Thrones ended. Although Aquaman changed his life on paper, medical bills, legal costs, housing expenses, and family responsibilities still weighed heavily on him. Fame didn't shield him from hardship, it magnified it. As Jason pushed forward, trying to rebuild after heartbreak, his emotional and physical exhaustion began to collide in dangerous ways. Friends reported that he became withdrawn, spending long hours alone, taking long motorcycle rides just to quiet the noise in his head. He spoke frequently about mental fatigue, about feeling like he was running from something, but not knowing what. The smile remained, but it became thinner, more fragile. And then came the industry pressure. Hollywood, as always, is relentless. After the success of Aquaman, studios expected Jason to maintain the same level of intensity, charisma, and physical strength. But the truth was, he was struggling to keep up. The studio system doesn't slow down for anyone, especially not action stars whose entire careers depend on a larger-than-life image. Then Jason felt that pressure every single day. He began questioning everything: his identity, his roles, his purpose. Was he more than a superhero? More than a warrior? More than a physical symbol of masculinity? Underneath all the pressure, Jason's insecurities resurfaced. The same fears from his childhood, the fear of not being enough, returned louder than ever. But what truly broke him was not the injuries, not the financial stress, and not even the pressure of an industry that never stops demanding more. What broke him was realizing that success had taken him away from the very things that once gave him peace: family, home, simplicity, and connection. and just when he thought things couldn't get any heavier, another emotional blow hit Jason harder than anything before. Jason Momoa's story, despite all the fame, all the strength, all the charisma, ultimately reveals a quiet truth about the human heart. For years, fans saw him as the unbreakable warrior, the man who turned struggle into muscle and pain into purpose. But behind the scenes, Jason was carrying battles no camera ever captured. And in this final chapter, he finally lets the world see the man behind the myth. After the divorce, Jason tried to reconnect with a version of himself he left behind long before Hollywood found him. He spent months on the road, riding his motorcycle across forests, deserts, and coastlines. To everyone else, it looked like freedom. But Jason later admitted it was actually escape. He said the silence of the open road was the only place where the noise inside. His mind softened even a little, but even the longest road can't outrun reality forever. When he was injured during the filming of Aquaman 2, doctors urged him to take time off, real time off. That meant stepping away from work, away from the chaos, away from the nonstop grind that had become his identity. And for the first time in his career, Jason Momoa did something unthinkable. He stopped. During those months of forced rest, he spent more time with his children than he had in years. Friends later said that despite all the pain he had been carrying, those moments making breakfast, drawing with his daughter, taking long walks with his son brought back a part of him he thought he had lost forever. But it also made something heartbreakingly clear. The family he once held together through sheer force of love was no longer the same. Still, Jason refused to let bitterness take root. He and Lisa Bond worked tirelessly to co-parent with Grace, choosing friendship over conflict. Jason once said, "If my kids are okay, then I can live with anything." But close friends confessed that behind those words was a man struggling to accept a life that didn't look anything like the one he built in his dreams. Professionally, he faced a new challenge. Hollywood was shifting. Big franchises were slowing down, and younger actors were being groomed to take the spotlight. For a man who had always fought for his seat at the table, Jason found himself wondering whether audiences still wanted him. Offers slowed. Scripts changed. His once unstoppable momentum felt fragile. But the tragedy of Jason Momoa isn't a fall from fame. It's something far more human. It's the realization that even the strongest people, the ones we look at as warriors, can feel lost, lonely, and uncertain about the future. In a rare interview, Jason admitted that there were nights he cried alone, overwhelmed by the fear that he had given the world everything, his strength, his body, his energy, and had nothing left for himself. He said, "I'm proud of the man people see, but I wish they knew the parts of me that are still trying to heal." Yet even in tragedy, there is something undeniably hopeful about Jason's journey. He has slowly rebuilt himself, not as the superhero, not as the warrior, not as the icon, but as a man learning to embrace vulnerability. He has poured himself into environmental causes, independent films, and projects that reignite his creative spark. He has surrounded himself with old friends who knew him long before fame. And he has become more open with fans, sharing the messy, painful, honest truth of what it means to start over at 4-6. Today, Jason Momoa is not the man the world once believed he was. He is something deeper, more complex, more human. His tragedy is heartbreaking, but it is also the reason so many people feel connected to him, because his story proves one thing: even the strongest heroes can break, but they can also rebuild.